Right, good afternoon. My name is John Smedley. I've been around databases for too many years of my life, something like 30 coming on towards 30 years of working with databases. As was said, I work for the Ingress Corporation, and Ingress is an open source database. That was the verbiage that someone gave me and said, stand up and talk about that. And I went, Web 2.0, what the hell is Web 2.0? So the first thing I had to do was go off and find out about that. But what I'm going to talk about is just a little bit of history about where we are with relational databases, where they've come from. Web 2.0, because there's nothing worse than sitting in an audience and going, I don't know anything about Web 2.0. What's Web 2.0? I thought there was only one web, and that was World Web. So we'll just talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about open source databases, the sorts of things that you need in an enterprise strength open source database, the sort of thing that we aren't running on Web 2, the sorts of things that maybe banks, building societies, shops, etc. are going to want to use for things like stock control. So from the bit of history, very simply, many, many years ago, some guy called Ted Codd sat down and came up with what was originally 12 rules, wrote 13 and said, that'll do. You know, like the tablets of stone that Moses brought down from the mountain, they became the 13 rules of relational database theory that were taken by Michael Stonebreaker at the University of Berkeley, who developed Ingress, who worked in conjunction with IBM, that were developing what was called System R and System 32, which ended up as IBM's DB2 and Oracle. So relational databases, there are lots of them around. There are the open source and the closed source systems. We're going to be talking about primarily Ingress because that's what I know about. But when we talk about what's in systems, because databases have been around for so many years, basically they've become a commodity. What you'll find in one, you'll find in another. What features and functions are in one may be in another, but under a different name. And I was talking to some people earlier on that are MySQL people, and they were kind of worried that, well, maybe I won't be able to understand, or maybe my job will be at threat, or maybe I won't understand the terminology and the technology. This isn't true about relational databases. I've worked on Oracle systems, and in fact, I was working on an Oracle system, was it 2 days ago, on my laptop, and I'm going, God, I remember all of this because I used to be an Oracle DBA. So it's learning like learning a language. You're learning different things. Lots of myths that we come across, and people say things to me like, oh, you know, open source databases, you know, they're not secure, they're not safe, etc. We know that that's not true. It's one of the things that is spread around by the closed source community. From the point of view of what do we get for our money, very simple. And one of the important things and one of the hidden things that people forget or never knew or don't know is that open source databases are so much cheaper to work with, to manage, to maintain, to look after, the total cost of. We don't send round our sales guys to knock on your front door if you're using Ingress and go, we've just increased the license cost, because there is no license cost. It's very, very easy for non-open source open source vendors to be able to poo-poo the relational, the databases, the open source databases as, well, they're not as good as ours. Where do we fit? Well, if you're talking about pure enterprise, up here, the full Monty, everything that you would want from an open source database, you know, 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week support, round the world, follow the sun, then you're looking at the top quadrant there. And it's the important thing that people look at is the cost. What's it going to cost us to take what we've got at closed source and move it to open source. And that it's often the long-term costs that are hidden. That it's very easy for vendors to talk about total cost of ownership. Oh, we'll give you a big discount this year. But the big vendors tend to find, or the big vendors tend to be able to claw that back over a 5-year period, and it's not something that people think about. They think about what's happening this year. How much is it going to cost me from my budget this year? Oh, the salesman from that particular closed source database company has come in and promised me a discount. Any sales guy that promises a discount knows he's going to get the money back somewhere else from you. He's locked you in. And that's the problem with closed source databases. And in the open source world, we talk about non-locking in. I know I sat up on the panel up here as an Ingress representative, but people talked about the ease or the difficulty of moving between one database vendor and another. It's actually not that difficult depending on how you've built your applications. Database vendors, open source particularly, have gradually been moving closer and closer together. We have been looking at what MySQL does and what Postgres does and what type SQL they support and what data types they support. And we've been building those in not as ANSI standard because they may be or they may not, but putting them in as, in quotes, hidden features so that we support maybe data types that are non-ANSI standard, so that when you create your SQL script, that we can take that and we will just parse it and convert it into whatever Ingress uses. Example of this, and it's from the closed source world, Oracle has a data type called numeric. Non-ANSI standard doesn't exist. We can create a table within Ingress which says, okay, I'm using the numeric data type. Ingress just says, oh, it's numeric. I will convert this to a decimal whatever under the covers. And it makes converting from one database vendor to another very much easier. And we've done the same with a number of other features and functions so that we've hidden those, but means that converting applications, Oracle uses a so-called decode statement, non-ANSI standard. ANSI has an if statement, an if-then-else statement. And all we've done is taken that and under the covers converted. Whenever someone sends across a piece of SQL that says decode, the parser goes, oh, I can cope with that. So we've hidden features there so that we can help people reduce down the cost of moving from one database vendor to another. And I know that there are other vendors. I know Postgres has been working with creating a PLSQL lookalike, because PLSQL is an interesting piece of coding. The normal way that we look at it from a conversion point of view is to say, well, PLSQL will convert it to Java. We've got a little piece of, a little engine in Ingress that we use for putting PLSQL through so that we can convert it into Java code. And our consultant services, the guys out there wrote it because we are doing conversions from one form to another. From the Web 2 point of view, I had to go away and find out what Web 2 was. I know I should know, but I didn't. It's the sort of thing that is, as it says up there, a web-based application that facilitates interactive information sharing. Oh, yeah, okay, interoperability, user-centered design, collaboration, etc. And you go, yeah, okay, and there you go. All of those things which every, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 16-year-old, whatever, knows about. The only one I ever know about is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is really, really useful to me. That's where I found out about Web 2. So all of these types of things, and the guys that we were sitting up on the stage with earlier, the guy from Facebook, Jonathan, was talking about, what they're doing with open source databases and the hidden features or the features that they have which are memory management, huge memory management, big table management, that sort of thing within the system. So you look at Web 2 and you go, okay, well, what then is not Web 2? And you go, well, it must be everything else. And you go, well, okay, shopping website. Is that Web 2? Well, I know that that one isn't, because all it is just a display system of the stuff that you can go and buy in the store. This one, very useful to me. I'm single. I need to go get my food shopping. I'm down here this week. I've already ordered my food to be delivered back home through this website so that it's all there when I get back. I know what time I'm landing, that the shop will deliver. Is that a Web 2? Well, people would look at that and say, is that a social website? It is to me. It's the most important thing in my life. Without food, I starve. If you go to something like that, the traditionalists, the people who are the fundamentalists would say, oh no, that's not Web 2. We've got a community forum on there. You can download software from there. You can do all sorts of things on there which are Web 2 based. Anything that's community, wiki, that gives us the information. But behind that, there's Ingress Database. It's where we store the information. We look very silly saying, yeah, Ingress website, run by MySQL, supported by Oracle. We would be embarrassed. So that's basically Web 2. We know that there are all sorts of differences between between open source and closed source. People come up to me and they go, well, how big is Ingress? How much do I need in order to install it? What memory do I need in order to run it? And when you start asking questions like that, which aren't well documented, I can tell you that if you download open source Ingress, it's about 250 meg, of which 120 meg is documentation. So if you, yeah, exactly. We supply all our documentation within there. People go, you do? Is it free? Do you give it away? Yes, we're open source. If you want to contribute to the documentation, and a number of other open source vendors do the same thing, that you can edit our documentation online, make changes or add comments that will get picked up by the documentation group in order to improve things. How much memory do you need to run it? Ooh. How many terabytes of memory do you need to run Ingress? And the answer is, Ingress is very, very unhungry about memory. I've had complaints that we're not using all the memory that people have gone out and bought, and why not? Well, first of all, you're on a 32-bit operating system, sir, and you're restricted, but we tend to find that open source systems are less resource hungry. Why? Because lots and lots of eyes have looked at it. Lots and lots of people have looked at it and said, there are better algorithms that we can include. There are better things that we can do for memory management. We can be more efficient, more effective on what we are doing. So it gives us a big advantage over other people. And they're things that people don't think about, that they don't know when we're talking about open source systems. Buzzwords that are bandied around, like enterprise, what are we actually talking about? Well, if you go away and ask marketing people, and I did, and they gave me 4 buzzwords: performance, availability, flexibility, and management. And you go, okay, that's fine. The majority of open source vendors can provide that. What we don't provide, in many cases, is some level of 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week support. And we get beaten by that. We get beaten as a stick, used as a stick to beat us, because the closed source vendors, those people who we are dealing with, and often the banks, the building societies, the shops, etc., won't touch our products because we can't provide that level of support. I deal a lot with the Irish government, and the Irish government had a policy of no open source, which was a bit scary when Ingress declared itself open source, and the Irish government had just released 3 brand new systems based on top of Ingress. One was taxation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. One was the motor vehicle registration for every vehicle in Ireland, and the next one was for, I want to take my driving test, and they then said, we don't support open source systems. And it's like, you've just spent lots and lots of money on this, what are you going to do? And they ran round in panic mode, as the Irish do. It took them about a week of drinking Guinness and sitting there and pondering and talking to the pixies and the fairies, and they came up with, so long as you can provide us with 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week support, then we're happy. And one of the things that we can do, which a lot of other database, open source database vendors currently can't do, is supply 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week support across the world. There are organizations that can provide support 24/7, and they call it community, or fix it yourself, or that they have limited pockets of support across the world, and we need to get better at that as a community in order to get more companies, more organizations to look at our products and to take our products. The reason that we have strong 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week support was we were a closed source community, and we went to open source, and we've kept everything in place. And I talk to people, in fact I've sat outside earlier on today talking to somebody, and they were going, what sort of support can I get from your product? I know it's open source, does that mean I have to fix all the bugs myself? And the answer is no. We'll provide you with fixes and patches once you have paid the subscription to us. And they go, didn't know that. Probably I'm talking to a lot of you and you're going, yeah, we know all of that, we know all of that. The problem is that, are you the guy that signs the check? Because often the guy that signs the check is panicking about open source because they don't know this, and we're very bad at communicating upwards. A lot of us are techies. I'm a techie, which is why, I get sent down here because they say, go and talk to people about open source and the technical side of it. Features that people want. 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week systems are becoming the norm. Banks want to run 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week. We want to be able to do things like online reorganization of tables, to be able to keep the system up and running because we are a worldwide organization. And one of the things that we are able to do within Ingress, which came in a release, a couple of years ago, was to take a relational database table, and while people are updating that table, to do the housekeeping on it. To reorganize that table either to a different table structure or back to a nice tidy structure, because relational database tables tend to get untidy simply because we're inserting, deleting, updating, moving data around within the table, changing the key when we shouldn't be because we got our relational design wrong, and we're very good at that. So online ability to reorganize tables is an essential. We can do that in Ingress. It's nice, it's there, it's hidden. We haven't jumped up and down too much and told people about it. Why? Marketing people have got more important things to worry about. That's a techie issue. No, let's talk about something like the color of our website. Levels of locking, and I know that talking to Jonathan today, he was talking about, and he was one of the people on the panel earlier who was from Facebook, was about locking levels and types of locking and all the things that people want to be able to do. And one of the criticisms he was leveling at relational databases was the inability to switch off the serializable transactions. Serializable transactions within relational databases can be important. If I'm running a banking system, I know I want to be able to contain and maintain the ACID properties of transactions. If I can't do that, then my transactions, I could do one part and not another. So we are now in a situation where we can support all sorts of pieces and levels of locking within the relational database world, and often we hear that you can't do this, you can't do that, it's a performance hit, it's an overhead. Over the last few years, performance improvements have been made to reduce down overheads. And if you take something like MySQL and you go to bog standard MySQL downloaded, you've got no transaction engine, so there is no locking overhead. The problem is the moment you put in a transaction engine, locking overhead occurs. And we have to keep things like that to an absolute minimum. Why? Because the more transactions we're pushing through the system, the slower things will get. So over a period of time, the work has been done to reduce down overhead, to get better algorithms. And again, it's the sort of thing that people are still thinking, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I looked at open source, or I looked at at this particular database vendor, and well, it wasn't as good as that particular closed source vendor or something else. And people need to have a look and go back and review things because changes have occurred. All sorts of things that are needed. Recovery, disaster recovery, pieces that go into the system that are claimed are not there. If you go out and you download basic Ingress, we supply you with things like immediate replication. It's part of the package. And we use replication for things like disaster recovery, not just for moving data around. We can also move data around between databases and database vendors. There's a package called HVR within Ingress that we can replicate out of other people's databases and into Ingress databases. It gives us a layer of infrastructure for moving data around. It may be that we want to move from this database over here into a data warehouse. We have the capability to do that. It's not the sort of thing we've been jumping up and down and shouting about. It's the sort of thing that we need to jump up and down and shout about and to bring out into the daylight and not to keep hidden. Federated databases, people were talking to me this week and saying, oh, federated databases. And I say, yeah, we've got federated databases. We've had federated databases for 25 years. And they're going, have you? No one told me. I said, yeah. When Stonebreaker designed databases, Stonebreaker was designing databases with federated databases in mind. And somebody said, well, why don't you tell us these things? And I said, well, have you been to the website? And they go, well, no. You should be telling us these things. Why do you keep them hidden? And often it's a naming convention. We call it Ingress Star because that's what it was whenever it was, not federated, but we support federated database systems. Not just on top of Ingress. We can federate across other people's database systems. We've got technology that can do that, so you can now build, we've been able to build federated databases across Oracle and Informix and Microsoft and SQL, Sybase and Ingress and project those as if they were a single unified database. You write a single piece of SQL. Ingress doesn't care whether that database is a local database and you're running against that or a federated database. You often don't even have to change the SQL, you don't have to change the SQL in order to make use of a federated database. It's transparent. And we use the word transparent because it is. It's all done at the database layer below the application. And again, it's something that people don't know. They don't realize. They've been using other products, and there's lots and lots of things that we can do that have been hidden, and therefore we have to start exposing those. All sorts of other things that can be supported that we don't tell people about. In fact, I found that we had implemented in the product parallel query, and they'd never switched it on. It's all there, it doesn't work. Someone in the code had written something which said, you know, only use parallel query when this particular circumstance arrives, and people have thought they've been using parallel query when they haven't. A hidden bad, now it's been activated, and we've now got a hidden good, which is we've now got the ability to make proper use of parallel query execution. So there's all sorts of things that are in there that we need to make use of, we need to jump up and down about. Cross-platform support within the non-closed source world, within the open source market, is huge. We're one of the last vendors that actually supports OpenVMS, the Itanium platform. Why? Because we have a very large customer base on Itanium. And the people talk about cluster support on Linux, and that cluster support has been available on products like OpenVMS for years and years and years, and that we run on that. Why? Because it's tried, it's tested, it works for us. So there's all sorts of things that we make use of. We make use of things now on Linux, where we're running on Itanium chip, that we now have a column store ability within the Ingress relational database, and we now have a hybrid database, and we're making use there of hidden facilities at the lowest level of the chip, where we're using the L1 memory, the L1 facilities memory on the chip, and are doing processing at the chip level. Hidden, yes. Fast, yes. And it makes a huge difference to analytic type queries. It's the sort of thing that we need to stand up and shout about, because the closed source vendors, other people, are doing the same thing. But we're keeping them hidden simply because, I don't know why, marketing isn't up to jumping up and down soon enough, early enough, fast enough. I mentioned total cost of ownership. I'm not going to mention it again, that we know that open source is cheaper, easier, that people build things to go with it. Management tools are a prime example of things which get built simply because people have the time or they have the interest. And we already have projects, and there's probably projects underway with MySQL to build, what was it? MyPHP was one of the early ones. And there are all sorts of management tools that people build. Why? Because database administrators can sit around and they can get inside the database engine by looking at the code and deciding what they have. Oh, she wants me to just stop talking. Administration tools. Something that I come across, I've got probably 2 more slides. This one is very interesting, that geospatial and geospatial capability, geospatial data types, have been limited and lacking within the open source world. A little project started at the University of Carleton to build geospatials as an open source project for Ingress. It carried on and it grew. A couple of guys being supported by the Google Summer of Code, building spatial data types. There's now something like 200 people working on that project, has resulted in the founding of the OS Geospatial organization that is now defining standards. And I say to you, how many of you knew that? And it's like, none of us did. And this is the sort of thing that open source and open source databases are driving. So we've not only created a set of geospatial objects that we can now put into Ingress, but we've defined a standard, and we've started a whole new organization within the world, and organizations such as Esri are members of this. The important one to me is Ordnance Survey. Google have got involved. Why? Google Maps, Google Earth. Sounds good to me. So from a little open source project funded by something, quite suddenly we open the covers And there, hidden under this little rock that we lifted up, is a whole new world of geospatials. Mentioned VectorWise just briefly. Project at the university in Amsterdam. We took the work there, we helped sponsor the work there, and that is the VectorWise project, the column store, so that we've now created hybrid relational column store databases. As I have been told, my time is coming up, that I mentioned revenue. Oops, where's, oh. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, Office of the Revenue, just briefly. Office of the Revenue Commissioners. Everybody in Ireland has to pay tax. Same as everybody in England has to pay tax, and I hope everybody in India pays tax. Yeah, right. Huge, huge database system. And if you say to people, oh yeah, who uses relational databases in real-time applications, in online applications where it's not Web 2, here's an example. Everybody has to register their tax. Everybody has to pay tax. Much as we are disgusted by the thought of it and how governments spend it, and the revenue is using an open source database system, not just offline, not just online so that you can fill in your tax form online, but they're using it for analysis work to find out who's not paying the right amount of tax. And I saw in the Irish newspaper recently that the Irish government now produces a list of bad boys, people who owe tax and haven't been paying it. And that's all come out of work with open source database systems. And I'm being waved at frantically, please shut up. Yes, I will do. I am going to close now, and thank you very much for listening, and hope this has been of interest to you. And I will now hand back to the organization so that you can have the next speaker.